There are places in this world where the air feels heavy, where your spirit feels drained, and where darkness lingers like an invisible shadow. These are not ordinary cities, they are gateways, territories where demonic forces move freely, feeding on fear, sin, and brokenness. And if you are not spiritually prepared, stepping into these cities can entangle your soul in battles you were never meant to fight. Today, I will reveal to you 5 U.S. cities that have become strongholds of spiritual infestation, places Christians must be alert to and avoid unless God Himself calls you there for His work. When we speak of recognizing spiritual strongholds in modern cities, we must first understand that not every stronghold is made of stone walls or iron gates. Some strongholds are unseen, woven into the culture, the traditions, and the very atmosphere of a place. A stronghold is simply a place where darkness has found permission to dwell, where it has been invited, and where it continues to grow because it is welcomed by the people who live there. In ancient times, idols were carved, temples were built, sacrifices were offered, and everyone could see clearly where evil operated. But in today's world, it often hides behind entertainment, music, politics, commerce, and even celebrations that appear harmless. This is what makes it more dangerous, because what is hidden is often more powerful than what is seen. Many modern cities have unknowingly built altars to darkness. They have allowed lust, greed, violence, and pride to dominate their streets. What begins as a cultural acceptance of sin grows into a collective spirit that saturates the entire city. When enough people give themselves over to certain patterns of behavior, it no longer remains just an individual struggle. It becomes a spiritual covering, a dark canopy that hovers over that place. And anyone who walks under that canopy is immediately affected by it, whether they realize it or not. Think about it. Have you ever stepped into a place and immediately felt heaviness, an unexplainable pressure on your mind or your emotions? You may not see it with your eyes, but your spirit recognizes it. That is not coincidence, that is atmosphere. The atmosphere of a city is shaped by the spiritual forces that dominate it. If worship and righteousness are exalted, peace and clarity flow naturally. But if sin and rebellion are celebrated, confusion, temptation, and oppression take root. It is important to understand that demons are territorial. They are not random, they are strategic. Just as God raises up places of light, the enemy seeks to establish his own territories of darkness. A city with a reputation for vice, corruption, or immorality often carries more than just bad behavior. It carries demonic reinforcement behind those actions. This is why some cities become known for addictions, others for violence, others for occult practices. These reputations are not accidental, they are spiritual fingerprints left by the activity of forces unseen. For Christians, the danger lies in not recognizing this reality. Too often, believers think only about the physical opportunities a city might offer: better jobs, more entertainment, greater freedom, without discerning what is moving beneath the surface. When a believer ignores the spiritual climate, they can easily find themselves struggling with thoughts, temptations, and heaviness that were not there before. They may think it is just stress or coincidence, but in truth, they are now battling against a stronghold that is centuries old. When we look at cities that have become breeding grounds for darkness, one of the first things we must understand is the hidden cost of living in such an atmosphere. Sin always comes with a price. It may appear glamorous, exciting, or even harmless at first, but what is invisible to the eye is the spiritual tax it places on every soul within its reach. These cities often project images of opportunity, wealth, entertainment, and pleasure. They draw people in with promises of success and fulfillment. But beneath the surface, there is a constant draining of the spirit, a slow erosion of values, and a subtle shift in what feels acceptable. The danger lies in how quickly the extraordinary corruption of a place begins to feel ordinary. The hidden cost does not reveal itself overnight. It creeps in slowly, like a shadow that lengthens without you noticing. People move into these cities chasing dreams, but without realizing it, their hearts grow heavier, their prayers weaker, their morals more flexible. It becomes easier to compromise, easier to excuse behaviors that once seemed unacceptable, easier to silence the inner voice that warns them. This is because the environment is shaping them, molding them in ways they cannot see. Sinful atmospheres have the power to dull discernment, and when discernment is dulled, deception feels like truth. You will notice that in such cities, brokenness is disguised as freedom. Addiction is repackaged as recreation. Immorality is called self-expression. Rebellion against God is celebrated as progress. And the longer a person remains in that kind of atmosphere, the more those lies start to sound like wisdom. That is the cost, the slow but certain bending of the soul away from righteousness. The enemy does not need to attack violently when he can seduce gradually. But it is not only individuals who pay this price. Entire families feel the weight of it. Children growing up in these cities breathe in the culture around them like air, and it shapes their identities before they even realize it. Marriages collapse under the strain of temptation that surrounds them daily. Communities fracture because trust cannot survive in an environment of greed and exploitation. The city itself becomes a web of wounds, and while people continue to smile and pursue success on the outside, inside they are empty, restless, and tormented. The cost is also spiritual stagnation. In a city where darkness dominates, churches often struggle to thrive. Believers find it harder to pray, harder to gather, harder to feel the presence of God because the weight of opposition is so intense. And so the very thing that should be the lifeline for souls becomes scarce, hidden, or silenced. That is not coincidence, it is by design. This is why the atmosphere of a place must never be taken lightly. A sinful environment is not neutral. It will always demand something from you. And what it demands is your purity, your clarity, and ultimately your destiny. There are certain cities in the United States that stand out not only because of their size or influence, but because of the spiritual darkness that clings to them. These places have become known for more than just their culture or landmarks. They are recognized for the spirits that rule within them. It is not difficult to see when you look closely. Their histories are stained with rebellion, their streets echo with violence, and their celebrations often glorify the very things that God warns us against. These are not random traits. They are the signs of spiritual infestation, the fingerprints of demonic presence woven into the life of the city. When a city repeatedly opens its doors to sin, it does not remain a collection of individual choices. It becomes a spiritual identity. That identity begins to shape how the city is known to the rest of the world. Think about it. Some cities are famous for gambling, others for immorality, others for a culture of witchcraft or open rebellion against God. These reputations are not simply the result of human behavior. They are rooted in spiritual realities, in agreements made, in altars raised, in doors left wide open for darkness to claim its ground. The enemy is always looking for places where he can establish his throne. He thrives in environments where sin is normalized, where evil is celebrated, and where people no longer feel conviction for what they are doing. That is why certain cities seem to carry a heaviness greater than others. They have been chosen as centers of influence, hubs through which demonic spirits can spread their deception to the rest of the world. And because these cities often hold great economic or cultural power, their influence does not remain local. What is born in their streets spreads across nations through music, film, entertainment, politics, and commerce. For the believer, this reality cannot be ignored. To know which cities are infested is to understand the battlefield. God never calls us to be naive. If a place is saturated with violence, if it is drowning in addiction, if it is famous for occult practices or for mocking holiness, then that place is not just dangerous in the physical sense, it is a spiritual trap. Entering such a city without discernment is like stepping onto enemy ground without armor. You may go for business, for pleasure, or for opportunity, but you will face battles you did not prepare for. We must remember that these cities, as glamorous or attractive as they may appear, are not neutral territory. They are strongholds where forces of darkness have entrenched themselves, and when light enters such places, it is immediately opposed. That is why Christians must approach them with caution, with prayer, and with an awareness that the enemy's influence there runs deep. Because to walk blindly into such cities is to underestimate the power of an infestation that seeks to spread beyond their borders. The moment a Christian sets foot in a city overrun by spiritual darkness, they are stepping into a battlefield that is already active. The war is not visible, yet it rages constantly in the atmosphere. It is not a war fought with guns or with armies, but with thoughts, temptations, desires, and distractions. And this is what makes it so dangerous, because you may not even realize you are in the middle of combat until you begin to feel the effects in your spirit. When a place is saturated with demonic influence, believers who enter it can sense a strange heaviness pressing against their soul. Their prayers feel harder to release. Their thoughts become clouded with confusion. Suddenly, temptations that seemed far away before begin to surface. Anger, lust, pride, or despair creep in almost uninvited. And it feels like the city itself is whispering these things into their ear. That is because the forces at work there are not passive. They do not wait quietly. They actively oppose light, searching for ways to weaken faith and silence the voice of God within. Some Christians mistake this pressure as simply stress or tiredness. They may think it is because of the business of the city, the noise, or the overwhelming culture. But what they are truly facing is resistance. Just as a soldier feels the weight of the enemy's fire when he steps onto the battlefield, so too does a believer feel the weight of the demonic presence when they move into a territory claimed by darkness. It is not random, it is intentional. The enemy's goal is to wear down the believer until their guard is dropped, until compromise feels easier than obedience, until silence feels safer than prayer. The invisible war in these cities is also psychological. Demonic influence works to distort truth and make lies look attractive. It convinces people that holiness is outdated, that sin is freedom, that rebellion is strength. And when a Christian is surrounded by this message day after day, it takes strong discernment to separate the voice of God from the noise of the crowd. Without that discernment, even the strongest can be deceived. But make no mistake, this war is not unwinnable. Those who are spiritually alert, who remain clothed in prayer and in the armor of God, can walk into these places and stand firm. Yet the danger comes when believers underestimate what they are facing, thinking they can handle it on their own. That is when the battle is lost before it even begins. Every city has its culture, its beauty, its opportunities, but when a city has surrendered itself to darkness, the Christian must understand that stepping into it is stepping into conflict. And without awareness of that reality, they risk becoming casualties in a war they never even realized they were fighting. There are always signs that reveal when a city has crossed from being simply troubled to being spiritually dangerous. These signs are not hidden. They are plain to see for those who are willing to look beyond the surface. The first sign is a celebration of violence. When a city becomes known for its high crime rate, for bloodshed on its streets, for unrest and chaos that never seems to end, it is not just a matter of poor leadership or lack of resources. Violence is a spiritual symptom. It is the mark of spirits that thrive on destruction, feeding on anger, hatred, and division. Where murder and brutality become normal, darkness has already made its home. Another sign is the normalization of sin. In such cities, things that once caused shame are now displayed openly. Immorality is no longer whispered about in the dark, but is paraded in the light as if it were virtue. What God has called wrong is not only accepted but celebrated. This shift in moral boundaries is not simply cultural change, it is spiritual decay. When the conscience of a city dies, when right and wrong are blurred, the enemy has already tightened his grip. You will also notice an increase in occult practices and witchcraft. Some cities openly embrace festivals, rituals, or symbols that glorify darkness. Shops dedicated to the occult flourish, and people practice divination, spells, and rituals as though it were entertainment. This is no accident. Where witchcraft is welcomed, demons are invited, and once they are invited, they do not leave easily. These practices may appear harmless to the world, but spiritually they are agreements, doors opened wide to infestation. Another sign is despair that lingers like a fog over the people. In these places, hopelessness is almost tangible. Depression, addiction, homelessness, and brokenness spread like wildfire, and no matter how much money is poured into programs or solutions, the problems only seem to multiply. That is because the issue is not only physical, it is spiritual. Darkness drains the life of a city, leaving its people weary, restless, and lost. Perhaps one of the clearest signs is the rejection of God. In these cities, churches struggle to survive, truth is mocked, and anyone who speaks of righteousness is silenced or ridiculed. Faith becomes something unwelcome, and the name of God is pushed further and further out of public life. Whenever a city reaches this point, it has aligned itself against the light, and in doing so, it has declared war on all that is holy. These signs are not coincidences. They are warnings, clear indicators that a city has become spiritually dangerous. And when you see them, you must know that you are not walking through neutral ground. You are walking through territory that has already been claimed. Even though certain cities are deeply infested with demonic influence, this does not mean that believers are left helpless or unprotected. God has always provided a way for His people to walk safely, even through the darkest of places. The key is awareness and preparation. Too often, Christians underestimate the seriousness of spiritual warfare, thinking that a casual prayer or a good intention will shield them from everything. But Scripture makes it clear, without the armor of God, we are vulnerable. Protection is not something that happens by accident. It is something we must put on daily with discipline and conviction. The first form of protection is prayer. Not the kind of prayer that is rushed or spoken without focus, but prayer that creates a covering, a shield around your spirit. Prayer aligns you with God's presence, and where His presence rests, darkness cannot freely operate. In spiritually infested cities, prayer is not optional, it is survival. Without it, you walk uncovered, exposed to every whisper, every temptation, every attack. With it, you walk clothed in authority, because the enemy recognizes when someone is covered by the power of God. Another vital protection is fasting. Fasting disciplines the flesh and sharpens the spirit. When you fast, you weaken the influence of the body so that the voice of the spirit becomes stronger. In places filled with distraction, temptation, and noise, fasting trains your soul to discern clearly. It breaks chains, it silences confusion, and it opens your eyes to see what is truly happening around you. Many battles that cannot be won by words alone are won through fasting, because fasting is a weapon that starves the enemy of influence. Discernment is equally essential. Not every door in a city should be walked through. Not every opportunity should be taken. What looks harmless may be a trap, and what looks appealing may carry spiritual chains. Discernment is the gift that allows you to recognize what is of God and what is of the enemy. It is the inner knowing that stops you before you step into destruction. Without discernment, Christians become easy prey in environments where deception is the weapon of choice. And then there is the armor of God itself: truth, righteousness, faith, the word, salvation, and the readiness of the gospel. Each piece is necessary, because each guards a different part of who you are. When you are clothed in this armor, the arrows of the enemy cannot pierce you. The city may be filled with darkness, but the light within you becomes untouchable, because you carry the authority of Christ everywhere you go. This is why Christians must never walk into infested places carelessly. Protection is not just about safety, it is about victory. When you are prepared, when you are covered, when you are equipped, you can stand in the middle of the enemy's territory and still remain unshaken.